the Rankled Engineer. Today's build, we're doing this planer cart, and of course it has a flip top. So the goal is to be able to eventually mount other tools on the top side of this, be flipped over and be used as a planer. I'm thinking disc sander or a bench grinder. Got a nice little drawer that I can use to keep some of the accessories that go with this, and then as I put other tools on here, some of those consumables. But it's nice and compact, it rolls around pretty well. I've got these little flange bolts that go on each corner. With that, it's time to get to the build. Alright, so I'm in the shop with my new planer. I'm very excited about having a new planer. And of course the first thing you have to build is that stand we've been talking about. So this is going to be my tabletop. Just a bunch of 2x3s. I've put them together in groups of 5. They're 24 inches long, which should be long enough to house that. Right now they're just temporarily screwed. I'm going to run them through the planer a couple times to get the top side flat, then I'll flip it over, and then I'll start going back and forth. I'm hoping to have at least 2 inches left over with the thickness, so I'll be taking off about a 1/4 inch or so on each side. And then I'll unscrew it, and then for the flip top action I'll go ahead and jig it so that I can get a nice, I got a 1/2 inch rod right up here. That will be my swivel point, and so I'll drill some 1/2 inch holes through each board on the drill press, and I'm going to use some threaded rod to also tighten it all together at the end. So I'll glue it, probably screw it, probably put those threaded rods through, and build it up into one large piece that'll be the tabletop. It will be pretty heavy, but this thing weighs about 100 pounds, and so it'll be nice to have this heavy duty. So I'm going to start messing with the planer. This is my first time using this one. Working really well, but of course the dust separator is already full. So that worked really well. These are just under 2 inches. Two major advantages that this planer has over my old one. The first is it's got 3 blades instead of 2, which helps with the smoothness of the cut. But then it also has 2 speeds, a high cut and a low cut.
The construction of the tabletop starts by cutting all the pieces to length. Once that is completed, we need to get all the holes drilled for the 1/2 inch diameter rod. We want to try and get this as close to center as possible. We finish the fabrication of each of the tabletop pieces by adding the holes for the threaded rods on each end. I decided to glue the table together in 2 pieces because it was taking a long time to apply that much glue, and I didn't want it to set up and start to lose workability. After the glue had dried, I went ahead and ran a really long 1/2 inch diameter drill bit through both halves. This cleared out any of the gunk and glue that may be in there, so this way the 1/2 inch diameter rod could slide nicely through the holes and help align them as the 2 halves are being pushed together. I then glued both halves together to form the table. The threaded rods serve 2 purposes. The first is to give a bit of a belt and suspenders approach to keep the table together The other is to act as an attachment point for the table to the cabinet. As it spins around, I'm able to anchor the table to the cabinet using some flanged bolts to lock it in place. I use coupler nuts to tighten the threaded rod down and compress the tabletop. Those couplers will act as the receiving end to a flanged bolt. Will help lock the table to the cabinet and keep it from spinning while in use. I hit the surface with an aggressive belt on my belt sander and then moved over to an orbital sander. Didn't go for a super smooth finish, but just something that was comfortable. I eased the edges on the table with a quarter round of my trusty router. And again, just to make it feel a little better, look a little more finished. Typically when I bench mount my tools, like my chop saw or the table saw, I like to leave some room on the threaded rods that support the tool. So rather than clamping the tool to a working surface, I clamp it to the bolts. This allows me to level the tool as needed, and over time, sometimes it can slip or wood can expand and contract, and this just helps keep the tool nice and plain to the working surface that I have, whether it's a table or a bench that's next to the tool. I'd hoped to do that with the planer, but there's a flange that runs all the way around the tool, and it would have made it very difficult to try and tighten nuts and get them perfectly level as I use the tool. So instead I went ahead and opted to mount this directly to the tabletop. It just meant I had to be really accurate in my construction of the table and the cabinet with the wheels and everything, so that the planer work surface and the extension tables that attach to it are all at the same height. A little nudge here, and there she falls into place. After completing the top and mounting the planer, it was time to construct the rolling cabinet base. I used 3/4 inch plywoods for the side, the base, and the back. I left room, since there's some space at the bottom, to put in a drawer, and this drawer can be used to hold all the accessories for the planer and those other tools that I mentioned. So instead of placing a drawer pull on this cabinet drawer, I went ahead and just cut in a handle. I used a template that I had left over from my kitchen that my dad made for our kitchen cabinets. Cut it out with a saber saw, finished it up with the template on a flush cutting bit on the router, and then eased the edges for comfort. I attempted to cut the rod with my trusty angle grinder, but there was not enough room to get it into place, so I switched over to one of my favorite tools, the Sawzall. I used a hat clamp on each side of the rod to keep it in place and keep it from moving, just like a Red Ryder wagon. Now I know. Probably a bad idea to just bear the 1/2 inch diameter rod on the 3/4 inch plywood. I did give a quick look at the local hardware store for a bushing or some kind of bearing that I could stick on this 1/2 inch rod in hopes that it would move better and last longer. But I wasn't able to find anything that had the perfect diameter to match this threaded rod. An architectural colleague of mine, Mr. James Horeca, who's a master builder, pointed out the folly of my ways. And he sent me a link to a bushing that will serve its purpose well, and I will add that to this tool when I get a chance. He also offered some words of wisdom, like hardening the fibers of the plywood below the bearing point with either, normal super glue or an epoxy, just to help give those fibers a fighting chance against the abrasion that they're going to encounter. I was able to start running this African mahogany through the planer. This is going to be for my dining room table, and that build's in progress, so hopefully someday soon that will be done. I think the cart looks nice. The finished drawer is decently large, just needs a few tweaks and some pluses. And, I'm ready to start using the planer heavily. Thanks for watching the Rankled Engineer Build, this planer cart. Hit us up on all of our social media platforms, hit subscribe, add your comments below. Thank you.